Hey guys, here we are to wrap it up for chapter 17. Today, section 5 is about perceiving and avoiding risks. What are they and how do they not happen to me, if you will? Well, very simply, some of the ways to reduce risk. Becoming informed, knowing what the information actually is, what the risk actually is. Thinking critically about the risk instead of just being emotionally driven, like, what is the actual risk here? And then making careful choices, decisions. And sometimes these are, lifestyle decisions. It might be a decision in the moment, and it might be, how do I actually want to live my life? Now, when we talk about risk in general, the greatest health risks actually come from poverty, gender, and then lifestyle choices. Now, as a general rule, when we talk about risk, we're talking truly about risk to our health, and the greatest risk is actually death. So a lot of times death kind of comes into play, but harm along the way. Now, the greatest of these is poverty. It is the greatest risk by far. Without enough money, you can't sometimes buy proper food, you can't get medicine, you're maybe not able to get an education, so you don't really learn how to make some of the decisions. You're going to be more prone to infectious diseases because you can't get good drinking water, not enough food for all of your health, getting all the right vitamins, minerals, etc., exposure to bad water. The list goes on and on and on. But poverty is the greatest factor, and everything we can do to help eliminate poverty around the globe benefits us all in reality, because poverty also tends to be why we have the strong population uptick. A lot of this goes hand in hand. Gender, being born male. Being born male, you tend to have a higher risk of certain things, especially when it comes to heart disease and some of these. As a general rule, the male life expectancy is less than female. So once again, nothing you can do about it, but there you go. And then your lifestyle choices. For example, something like overeating or smoking. I choose to eat very poor food and I'm overweight. Well, it puts me at greater risk for heart disease, lung, just lots and lots of stuff, hypertension, you name it, high blood pressure, if you will. And then smoking, I'm specifically putting myself at risk for emphysema, lung cancer, the inability to breathe as well. I'm specifically putting pollutants in my body known to cause problems. But anyway, just some of these that are there, if you will. If you'll take a look at the chart I have back here, I'm not going to go through every one line by line, but in the big one kind of up top, when it talks about the cause of death, kind of lists poverty, like 11 million people a year die, with really the root cause being poverty. Comes down to malnutrition and kind of the disease cycle, more exposed to infectious disease because of living in poverty. After that is air pollution, directly from air pollution, over 8 million people a year. Then it goes to tobacco, from tobacco into alcohol, just deaths specifically from alcohol. Then we move into things like work-related flu and pneumonia. Now, as a general rule, you're not really dying from flu, but flu can give you vomiting, diarrhea, and it's a respiratory illness, so it can lead towards pneumonia. Pneumonia is usually a thing that kills you, if you will, but flu is the reason that you wind up getting pneumonia, fluid in your lungs, draining down into your lungs. Around 2.4 million people around the world die every year to flu. Because they get the flu, that's the reason they wind up dying. Then diabetes, tuberculosis, and the list goes on and on. The smaller graph off to the right is lack of access. This is happening, and a lot of it is because of lack of access. The first one is just adequate sanitation facilities. The lack of being able to wash your hands, really get clean, get your food cleaned off, or clean water, just lack of sanitation, if you will. The next one is just enough fuel for properly cooking food. About 2 billion people a year die. They just don't have the fuel. They don't have enough food, if you will. And then electricity. Once again, another 2 billion people on the planet just do not have access to electricity. Adequate health care gets down to 1 billion people. Over 1 billion people on the planet don't have adequate health care. If they're sick, they can't just go to the hospital, or there's not even a doctor around in some places, and the medicine may not be available. Adequate housing, clean drinking water, and just even enough food for a healthy lifestyle. These are kind of the big reasons, if you will. It's because people lack access to these, what most of us think of as just normal things. This graph up here is the United States. Deaths in the United States. Cause of death, number one, tobacco use. 500,000 people a year, give take. Then we get down into accidents, like specifically like motor vehicle accidents, crashes in cars. Then we get down into infectious disease, which is this excludes the flu, other infectious diseases, alcohol use, diabetes, drug overdose, and then about 50,000 people a year to the flu and pneumonia. Rarely do you really die typically from the flu. The flu breaks everything down, and then you tend to get pneumonia. If you're already weak or ill, the very young, the very old, diarrhea and vomiting can be enough to throw it over the top. Let's take a look at a case study. Cigarettes and e-cigarettes. Now, cigarette smoking, this is the most preventable major cause of suffering and premature death among adults. Most simple way to put it. Very preventable. Don't smoke and you're not going to have problems from smoking. It's a known cancer causing, causes emphysema, problems with the respiratory tract. If you have problems with the respiratory tract and you get flu, COVID, any of these things, it just makes your problems much, much worse. Killed over 100 million people in the 20th century. And there's a lot of studies that are linked that it shows increased dementia and Alzheimer's. Cutting down the blood flow, not as much blood flow into the brain, causes problems there. Speeding up cases of dementia and Alzheimer's, typically in older age, sometime above the age of 60. The nicotine is why do people smoke? It's the nicotine. Nicotine is highly addictive. You get it in your system, and then without it, you want more, and you smoke another cigarette. Secondhand smoke also poses hazards. If you grow up in a home where somebody else smokes, especially in children that live in a house, they tend to have higher respiratory problems like asthma, other breathing issues, because they've been in a house where they've been exposed to it their whole life. These things tend to affect the very young, the very old, the worse. Now, in the United States, smoking has taken a serious decline. From around the 1950s up to about 50% of Americans used to smoke, some shape, form, or fashion. And that is down to 18% just by the numbers in 2013. So we have had a dramatic decrease in smoking in the United States. Now in China, it is a major problem. The government gets so much tax money from smoking, they really don't have anti-smoking campaigns. And there's a lot higher ratio of people smoking. But in America, we've cut it way down. And then came the e-cigarettes. We really thought we were on, the back end of people not smoking as much and out of fad, and young people weren't. And lo and behold, e-cigarettes come along. And it's a substitute for tobacco cigarettes. But the vapors contain some toxic metals, the glycerol and whatever. They're putting nicotine in what you're smoking, so you're still getting this benefit of nicotine. Now, you're not getting the tar, you're not getting some of the other chemicals that were in the tobacco, but we're kind of trading those chemicals for some others. In 2014, just by the studies, 13% of high schoolers had used e-cigarettes in some shape, form, or fashion. Now, the European Union has banned the sale of e-cigarettes to minors. We're trying to do things like getting, fruit flavors and menthol out, because that tends to attract a younger population. The reality is, we're not exactly sure. They haven't been around long enough to know. I'm going to use my dad as an example here. My dad had a quick temper. Now, he'd get a quick temper, he'd get mad, and he'd get over it. But my dad was prone to get really mad. The doctors, sometime in the 50s, suggested my dad start smoking so it would help calm his nerves. Literally, his doctor told him to take up smoking, it'd be good for him. When I was a little kid, probably around 14, 15, the doctors told my dad, if you don't stop smoking, it's gonna kill you. And he was like, you guys told me to start. But this was the reality. Doctors literally told him in the 50s to start smoking. And by the 70s, they were like, it will kill you. It's not good. We may be on the same boat with these cigarettes. They haven't been around long enough for us to have longevity studies. We know we have seen some deaths directly caused to them. It's something that's unknown. The precautionary principle, I would urge you to adopt here. It's better to be safe than sorry. Smoking, the most preventable thing. You don't do it, you're not going to get harmed. You're definitely pulling vapors into your body, and vapors are not always going to help. You've probably seen the picture before, but here it is. This is on the right-hand side, that's a smoker's lung. On the left-hand side, that's a normal, healthy lung. It's just got damage, and it's bringing in all the chemicals, all the smoke, all the pollutants, the tar. It damages the lungs, and if your lungs are damaged, they just can't do their job of pulling oxygen in and getting it to your body. And without enough oxygen, it leads to a whole host of problems, even including dementia and Alzheimer's in your older age. Well, smoking, the most preventable thing out there. Let's talk about another, technology. How do we eliminate risks from technology? Say something like a nuclear reactor, right? We don't want, it's a nuclear reactor, that could be really bad. Or, whatever the technology might be. Driving a car, right? We want it to be safe. Well, we have to break it down into this. There's the system reliability, like you're going to get in and drive a car. That's the system. It's you and the car. Or we have the nuclear power station and people are going to run it. Well, we have the station and we have the people running it and managing it, right? Having to throw the switches now and then, pulling this out, adjusting it. Just like you drive in the car. You've got to push the gas, you've got to put the brake, all this stuff. That's the system. The percent reliability is going to be the technological reliability, a percentage, times the human reliability, a percentage. So let's say the car is 95% reliable. In other words, there's kind of 5% we can't control. Something could break, something could go wrong, but it's a very, very small amount. And the human reliability is 75%, right? Because you've got a cell phone, there's other things on your mind. You may not, once again, just human error, right? So 75% of the time, the human's gonna do everything correct, and 25% we may make slight errors. Well, you take 0.95 times 0.75 and you get 0.71. So the system reliability is actually only 71% reliable. And this is what we have to come up with. Human reliability is always much lower than the technological reliability. We tend to build them pretty good, and it's also just much harder to predict because you don't know what's going on with a human. There's all these things that we're adapting and doing, and it's really hard to predict. I make up a number, 75%. Maybe you're 80%, but 95 times 80, we're still getting down in the 70s somewhere when we multiply it out. And human reliability, so we're talking about any kind of technological ability, there's the human element, and it varies from human to human, right? A NASCAR driver driving down the highway, maybe up in the 90%. And then someone else, you guys, brand new driver out there, your reliability is not up at 90% yet. You might be at 70%. So, the whole thing goes down. It's just really hard to predict human reliability. When it comes to trying to evaluating risks, most people do a really poor job. And here are some of the reasons why. Fear. I'm afraid of this. You're terrified of getting eaten by a shark, even though your chances of being eaten by a shark are like 1 in 200 million. It's a fear, and it is a very poor job of, there's really no risk for you to go swimming in the ocean, but you have this unnatural fear that there is. The degree of control. But I don't have any control if I get attacked by the shark. if we had, like, I'm driving the car, so I have control. In other words, we think it'd be safer for me to drive from here to the Grand Canyon because I'm in the car and I can control it. The reality is flying to the Grand Canyon in an airplane would be much safer based on the numbers. But we feel safer if I'm driving because I can control what's happening, as opposed to I'm flying in an airplane and there's nothing I can do. So a degree of control is one of these factors that comes in. Whether the risk is catastrophic or chronic. You're terrified. Here's a good example. I tell people I'm going to go swim in a lake this weekend because I'm practicing for a triathlon, and I get asked, I live in Florida, aren't you afraid of getting eaten by an alligator? My odds of getting eaten or even attacked by an alligator are like 1 in 300 million. It's virtually none. Nobody ever asked me if I'm afraid to drive there. The odds of me getting injured, the catastrophic, the alligator getting me, is not. But the ongoing danger of driving a car is very real, but we don't worry about that one. We're concerned. So whether it's a catastrophic risk or the whole building could fall, we tend to have a higher sense of fear, even though the reality of it occurring is incredibly low. An optimism basis. Oh, it's not going to happen to me. I can smoke cigarettes because my great uncle that I knew on my mother's married side never got cancer. This optimism, it's not going to happen to me. This is why we send 18 and 19-year-olds out to war, because they believe they're not going to die. You get people around my age, we're like, okay, I don't think I want to be on the front lines. I'm probably going to get shot and die. Optimism. You start smoking because you think, well, I can quit whenever I want, and it's not going to happen to me anyway. It's just one of the reasons that we do a bad job of evaluating risk, and just that instant gratification. You do drugs, odds are you're harming your body and it's going to cause you long-term harm, and you could do an overdose. But that instant gratification, I want to do it. You go speeding around town, the odds are you're more likely to be in a crash. But it's exciting and exhilarating to drive fast. Instant gratification. These are reasons that we tend to do a very bad job of evaluating risk. Now, certain principles can help us evaluate and therefore reduce the risk. Compare the risks. If you are going to go from here to the Grand Canyon, and it doesn't really matter, which would look, okay, by the numbers, it is much safer to fly, so we should fly, if you will. How much are you willing to accept? Once again, I ride my bike out on the roads, and I do go swimming in open water. These are risks. I simply feel the benefits to me outweigh the risks. There is a risk of me being hit by a car when I ride out on the highway, but the benefits of the exercise and being out in nature and riding my bike outweigh the risks to me. It's a risk I'm willing to take, but sometimes you do need, instead of just doing it, at least evaluate it. And there are places I don't ride my bike because I don't feel they are safe. If it doesn't have a bike lane, I usually don't go down those roads. There are a lot of these country roads that I know people ride on, and I choose not to because I try to stick to ones with a bike lane. I'm evaluating the risk involved and making decisions this way. And you want to concentrate on evaluating and carefully making important lifestyle choices. Am I going to eat this or am I going to eat that? My family a long time ago made a decision that we were going to seriously minimize the amount of meat and really processed foods that we eat. So we don't usually buy like a lasagna that's already pre-made. We don't buy pre-made food. We tend to cook our food from scratch, and we actually minimize the amounts of meat we eat. We try and keep it down. We try not to eat a lot of like processed stuff like processed hams or turkeys or hot dogs. We have them occasionally as treats, but it was a lifestyle choice. We decided that we would fix our food and we would try and have more fresh vegetables to try and keep ourselves healthy for longer periods of time. Now, the big ideas from this chapter, just as we kind of go back and look at everything there. We do face significant hazards as a human being on the planet, from infectious disease, want to do what we can to keep ourselves safe, exposure to chemicals that can cause cancers and birth defects, so we want to limit our exposure to those, and exposure to chemicals that can disrupt our immune system, weaken our immune system, our nervous system, or even our endocrine systems. Now, there's a lot of things out there in the way of pollutants that are in the air that we don't have much control over, but we can work towards putting laws to minimize these pollutants, which is something we can all do when it comes time to vote or lobby our congressman that yes, we want to put more regulations on burning coal. We want to remove coal burning power plants, things of this nature, so that we move towards more clean or renewable energy sources. Now, harm can be difficult to evaluate, but we need to put greater emphasis on pollution prevention. The more, once again, air pollution is 8 million people a year die from air pollution. Now in America, a lot of our cities are pretty clean, but not all of them. Like LA can be pretty bad, New York can be pretty bad. Pittsburgh has actually done a lot to really clean up their area, and they're pretty much a very green city. They use a lot of clean and renewable energy sources, which more of us really need to move to. But once again, trying to prevent pollution is just a big one. Ways to remove some of these major risks: be informed, know what the risks actually are. Think critically about what the risks are, and then make careful choices. It's not that you're going to live a risk-free life your entire life, but you want to be sensible when you can and make the best decisions that you possibly can. Guys, that is it for chapter 17. Take care, and we'll see you next time.